Thank you for joining. So I wanted to do a quick walkthrough of an application that I created, the amazing OpenELM model. It's an open source model created by Apple, and it's amazing. It's only 270 million parameters. And another way to think about that in terms of size is that, contrary to a lot of other models out there, it'll run purely on GPU. So when you think about edge devices, etc., this is really exciting. And so let's get into it. Take a peek. So here's the application I created out on Hugging Face. You know, it's really simple in some respects, but the other thing I wanted to do is make this about sharing information on the model and the great process that they kind of introduced. They made the model, as part of making the model open, they also were very transparent about how they trained the model, how they fine-tuned it, how they evaluated, etc. So, you know, the archive paper is definitely a great read, great learning experience. So, one of the things in the application that I've done here is that I created some samples in terms of data, like input prompts. So go ahead and use these, or create your own. I was working with another large language model to come up with some interesting prompts, and this one was kind of funny, explaining quantum physics in 5 words or less. But then, you know, that's kind of my sense of humor. So let's go with this example. You're 3 years old, count from 1 to 10. So, you know, giving the small language model, you know, a role to play and instructions. So let's see how it does. So in terms of behavior, it's interesting. It doesn't precisely follow instructions and gets a little off topic. It's not a lot of the other, even small language models I've tested. You know, it's less verbose and less rambling, but at least it's counting from 1 to 7 as far as it got before it's truncated just based on size. It's a parameter I set. Yeah, I encourage you to go out and take a peek. One of the other things that I love about Gradio is that some of the out-of-the-box stuff, particularly when you're using with Hugging Face, that it allows for, is that you can easily share and create a discussion. So, I clicked on share from the original screen. So I'm just going to give it a simple name, go create discussion. And so that way, in terms of if there's something that you want somebody else in your team or the greater community just to be able to review and take a look at, you know, you've started up a public discussion. So I think that as a feature, you know, thank you Hugging Face. You know, they maintain Gradio now, but also that their spaces are fantastic in terms of the amount of learning that occurs there. Okay. So this was one of the initial tests that I did, so where I learned, you know, that the ability about sharing and the fact that it's integrated in the community, I thought, wow. So this is the first sort of test that I did. I was using default parameters related to the Gradio application. You know, I think top K in particular was high, which sort of helped sort of explain why the response from the AI model was a little bit dark and a little bit off. So, yeah. So, you know, this was an initial test, and so there was great learning for me in terms of stepping back. You know, what's my responsibility in terms of why it was able to produce this result? And so this is kind of where I, you know, went through and, you know, went step by step to try to figure out the contributor and sort of looking at the parameters. I thought, hey, that top K parameter is off, and sure enough, when I, you know, changed it, adjusted it, that it was more safe in terms of the nature of the response, because it was more focused in terms of looking at the results that were the best match. Okay, and this is where, you know, I was going through step by step and looking at, you know, what's been documented, because it was clear from the paper that they were being very transparent in terms of training and evaluation. So I looked for examples here. So this one is, you know, it's a little bit hidden, but this is one of the key examples that I talk about in the discussion, and this was the basis for some of my first tests, but then they also go into here, you know, how to reproduce things using the Eleuther LM evaluation harness. So, some great, some great information out here, and quite incredible. So, and when I started with the baseline example of once upon a time there was, and sort of looking at this, there was very few parameters here. The only one that was set was that overrode defaults was the repetition penalty. So, in terms of training, it's clear that they've kind of have a unique sort of spin on the data that they used for training, which may explain some of the behavior and responses. And then this is where, using the very simple command line example, very few parameters, very additional application layers that I had created, I looked at the result of my simple question: you are a 3-year-old, count from 1 to 10. So it's displaying the numbers, but it's really not counting. So yeah, and so feel free to go through there, provide additional comments in the discussion if you have any thoughts. And this is where I also sort of touch on the Luther LM evaluation harness process, and I also created a link to a draft notebook that you can open up in Colab as a starting point, and feel free to provide feedback on opportunities for improvement, etc. But again, thanks Apple for an amazing, very small language model, and for sharing the evaluation process. So that's it, and thank you very much for joining.